In this video, I'm going to try to relate to you my theory of the 3 different modes of being, or levels of consciousness, if you will. This idea was born when I was thinking of how I would explain myself to my kid about why I believe what I do, when he's old enough to be curious about this stuff himself. Because the conclusions I've reached after a lifetime of thinking about this is often non-intuitive, but it will make sense when you put this concept over your eyes and view the world through it. So let's get into it. There are basically 3 different types of people in the world. Let's call the first type ignorant. They are typically non-political, just going through the motions of life as it happens to them. If you were to ask them anything deeper than just surface-level questions, you'd get nothing back in return. When you see one of those man-on-the-street bits, where the people they interview are totally clueless, this is the person they're showing you. If you've ever wondered how those garbage shows stay on TV for so many seasons, this is how. Shows like Big Brother and Survivor are kept afloat by people like this. People who are just sort of numb to the whole experience of life, always on some sort of anesthetic. You can see it in their eyes sometimes. I like to call it dumb eyes. It's a lack of awareness, a lack of curiosity. It's the end result of a lack of self-discipline, drive, and willpower. It's all right there in the eyes. This first layer of ignorance is the default state of kids, and our society works at every level to move the individual from this first level of ignorance to the second level of the normie. And most people don't reach that level. They stay permanently at this level. It's important to note that the ignorant person and the normie share the same levels of obedience to elites. The normies and midwits, the useful idiots of the elites, are obsessed with explaining the rules of why we should do this or that request of the state, and those explanations are always aimed at this first level of person, because the normie always assumes they are talking to this level. Because this person can be a little complacent at first, but never fear, because the ever-diligent normie is there to save the day and explain away why the elites are doing what they're doing. It's for our own good, you see. You see this with Chelsea Handler explaining to 50 Cent why he can't vote Republican. She had to remind him, in a way, that it was like he was a child, a retard, someone who had forgotten even the most basic aspects of life, including his own skin color. Because with enough constant messaging, the ignorant are guided by the normies in any way the elites want, and they are blissfully unaware of any of the mechanics of power happening behind the scenes. They simply see the get out the vote propaganda, and they do it. The second type is normie. They are totally controlled and operating in a worldview that is manipulated by higher-up elites. This is the boomer truth regime that Academic Agent talks about. That's the current framework under which the West is operating in. It's the Overton window of everything in mainstream life. Morality, spirituality, politics, it all gets funneled through this operating system. Now, this operating system gets installed from day one as a citizen in the West. The media, Hollywood, public schools, the future jobs they'll take are all geared to shape this person into what the elites want them to be. The normie can be left, right, or center. Every thread on the right is a fascist one, and every thread on the left is a communist one. That's the framework with which all global events are processed. The entire system is pandering to this group of people, the normies. The third type is enlightened. You see the world for what it really is, past the thin curtain of illusion that is presented to the normies. Think of the normie as being a completely stock car, and the enlightened person takes off those old parts, aka beliefs, and replaces them with more advanced high-performance parts. Academic Agent has said that conservatism is a process of unlearning, and as with the project car, the amount of unlearning or deconstructing you can do is unlimited. It really just comes down to our own levels of personal investment and dedication to studying and growing our knowledge base. Eventually, our ability to deconstruct the narrative and see the truth becomes the very essence of our political identity. And it's for this reason that many on the right are so willing to embrace current enemies into our group. All Kanye has to do is just say that he likes the way Candace Owens thinks, and next thing you know, he's running for president on the Republican ballot. Same with Caitlyn Jenner. Or how Scott Adams says that Bill Maher is 75% of the way to being a conservative. Well, that's just pathetic, and it's obviously not true. The only thing these people have in common is being able to pierce the veil just enough to see some of the BS behind it. Does that mean they're right-wing or conservative? Absolutely not. So how else can we differentiate these three different groups? Each of these groups are just representations of how they view reality and are a reflection of the state of their consciousness. The first person is operating on just a baseline level of consciousness. It's existing in a vacuum. We all wake up in this state. The more advanced concepts of our society don't even exist in this mindset. You are just you. You're in your house. You're taking a shower. You're getting ready for the day. You're just existing. You're unaware of the intricacies of the narrative layer that is above your life and shaping how it's going. For the eternally stressed out normie, this is the layer of consciousness they attempt to escape to, with things like meditation, prayer, drugs, alcohol, watching sports. This is the layer that they're trying to reach and, quote, clear their mind. It's also important to recognize that there are millions of things that we are ignorant of ourselves, even if we are enlightened, and that no matter how enlightened you become, there will always be aspects of life that you simply won't have the bandwidth to get into and uncover the truth. The next layer of consciousness is the narrative layer. It's what we tell ourselves about who we are, or rather, what the elites have told us to think about who we are. This is the layer doing all of the work in society. It motivates people to work. It decides who we talk to, what we drive, where we live, what international allies we have, whether we recycle, you name it. This is that layer. This is the layer elites are trying to edit in your brain on a daily basis. It's how they present the news to you. It's the morals they show in their movies. It's the framing of political enemies and ideologies that are taboo and off limits. And it's up to you to decide whether you want to believe in this layer or not, although most people are unaware that that choice even exists. And to prevent you from moving to the next layer of enlightenment, the system has all sorts of built-in antibodies to keep the infection of further knowledge to a minimum. Reality TV, social media, football, bars, clubs, it's all designed to keep you numb and from asking further questions that damage the narrative's credibility. And these are just the subtle ones. More blatant examples would be flat-out denial of freedom of information requests, or flat-out lying about the truthfulness of any given narrative, or hate speech laws, or compelled speech, or book burnings. As the internet matures and alternative media gradually chokes the life force out of mainstream media, this narrative layer becomes more and more thin and absurd. The only defense it has is to call you racist, homophobic, blah, 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 blah. You've heard it 1,000 times because it's been the go-to for so long they really haven't developed a better method. And as the narrative breaks down, these insults become completely hollow. If you haven't been called any of those things, I don't trust you. I just assume you're asleep and you're a normie or ignorant like everybody else. The normie doesn't spend a lot of time at the upper edges of this layer, but after a lifetime of being in the system, the normie is instantly able to recognize when a topic is off limits. Political correctness is one of these antivirus softwares that gets installed in someone's brain to limit themselves and others from bumping up against truth in that next layer of consciousness. And it's genius because the state can't have armed guards in every house monitoring everything that gets said or monitoring every incorrect thought. But it can just install political correctness onto your brain, and then you self-police yourself and other people if they happen to get out of line. I saw this on Twitter, and it sums it up nicely. It's the Mr. Smith effect. In the movie The Matrix, Mr. Smith has the ability to enter any body at any time. And of course, this often occurs when the Matrix is threatened by Neo. The scenario is a reflection of our real world. For example, you're down at the coffee shop, having a conversation with a friend, and everything is fine until you mention something like, 9/11 was an inside job. Now watch what happens. Up pops Mr. Smith to replace the person you were just having a conversation with to attack you, because all truths threaten the Matrix. The Matrix is programmed into most people in their youth, and because of this Mr. Smith programming, these people have become guardians of the Matrix, protectors of the code, police of the mind control, enforcers of the indoctrination, which holds together our false concept of reality like superglue. The person literally becomes a human embodiment of the narrative layer, and it is a very hard layer to mentally escape from. But also, writing about what the enlightened layer is can also be pretty hard, because it can be many things to many people. For a lot of people, simply recognizing the holes in the normie layer is as far as they go. And to be clear, I'm not making the argument that the enlightened layer is strictly a conservative layer, or a right-wing layer, because it's not. It's turning out that it's the layer of the nutrition weirdos that recognize lies in what we are being fed. It's people talking about the evils of seed oil, which I still haven't went down that rabbit hole to even know if it's enlightened or not. I suspect it is, but I just haven't done the research yet. It's learning that John Kellogg was a Seventh-day Adventist who invented cornflakes to lower people's libido so they wouldn't masturbate as much, or that the sugar industry paid scientists to demonize fat and downplay sugar. It's the conspiracy theorists who turned out to be right on almost everything, excluding the obviously wacky ones. It's the journalists and activists who fought for years to file Freedom of Information requests and dig into stories and do the work to actually fact-check the mainstream narratives. I recently read Tom O'Neill's really good book, Chaos, which completely exposes the lies about Charles Manson. And that type of reporting is done by someone who can push past the incentives that are there to keep you in check. And for him, it was very personally risky. Another great author is David McGowan. He wrote Program to Kill. And if you haven't read that, you haven't lived. And as far as I'm concerned, you're still largely existing in the normie layer. Read that book and tell me you don't view the world completely differently when you're done. It's the most influential book I've ever read. I had to take breaks because it was too mind-blowing at times to keep going. But I digress. The enlightenment layer is as broad as the narrative layer. It's like a mirror going across the whole thing. Name anything on the planet and there will be an alternative narrative about that thing. And in my experience, that is the enlightenment layer. Now this is where you have to be careful though, because elites have set up traps to capture midwit normies into thinking they've reached the enlightenment narrative, when in reality they've just been contained and subverted by the elites. Take the 1619 Project. That is an alternative narrative, but it's totally designed to appeal to a certain type of person, a gullible minority who's already been primed by a lifetime of propaganda to believe that kind of rhetoric. Or maybe it's the self-loathing white person who wants to prove to others how aware they are and woke and enlightened and how they're not a savage bigot like everybody else. This is the point of college, by the way. It's taking people and giving them fake enlightenment ideas to make them feel special and smart. To protect yourself from going down this potentially disastrous digression, the true enlightened person questions everything. Is what I'm being told actually true? Or is this a narrative that I'm biased to believe? People are pretty good at crafting narratives catered to you, that when you hear them, they ring truer than anything you've ever heard before. They initially have so much explanatory power, you can apply it to past events and it seems to explain everything. But you have to push past that initial dopamine hit of feeling like you discovered the secret of life. And this is a yucky feeling. You don't want to fact check yourself. You don't want to realize what you believed was a lie. It might lead you down a path you don't want to go. It's really hard and uncomfortable. On the Dunning-Kruger graph, this would be the valley of despair. This is also displayed in the "if you only knew how bad things really are" meme. I'm reminded of a CD I was given when I was in Bible school. It was from a very old sermon from a man named Bob Streblow. Supposedly he had went to a revival service on a college campus and was slain in the spirit for 3 days, during which he had 7 visions. I know this is getting into kooky territory, but stay with me. The sermon on that CD was about one of the visions he had, about a man named Mr. Pegalo, the town drunk. The vision starts off with God showing him 2 separate paths, one going up to heaven and the other going down to hell. The road to heaven was upward, narrow, rocky, dangerous, and hard to climb, and much of the vision had to do with that climb. The road to hell was downward. It was wide, flat, smooth, and as he got closer, he saw that it was packed with a mass of humanity that was running as fast as they could towards the cliff that dropped them off into the pit of hell. He was so shocked by this that he grabbed a random person out of the herd and he said, "My God, man, don't you realize where you're going? Don't you realize what you're doing?" And the man threw him off. He said, "Get off me. I don't care," in the most vile way that he could. And he quickly rejoined the pack, and then, just like everybody else, he went off the cliff to his doom. I've never forgotten that story, and how as I've gotten older, it seems to accurately describe the world we live in. COVID has proven this more true than anything. Try convincing the public of any of the facts that we know about COVID, and just watch them shrug it off and keep going down the retarded path to their doom. The enlightenment layer might best be summed up by this statement by Jordan Peterson. The path to enlightenment and wisdom is seldom trod upon, because if it was all a matter of following your bliss and what made you happy, everyone in the world would be a paragon of wisdom. But it's not that at all. It's a matter of facing the things you least want to face. The gateway to wisdom and the gateway to personality, which is exactly the same thing, is precisely through the portal that you do not want to climb through. The enlightenment layer is an inherently dark place. It's taboo. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. It's not for everybody. It's mature. There's no comfort in it. Many times, I wish I could just believe what everyone else believes. Life would be so much simpler that way. And sometimes it's hard to justify why I do this to myself. And at times like these, I'm reminded of a letter that author Iris Cheng wrote to her mother, when her mother asked her if she was putting too much time into her career and researching her book on the evils committed during the rape of Nanking. She replied, "That is not true. It's just I believe I have some power to shape my destiny, and I want Christopher, her son, to have in his mother a strong role model, to be a person who is his own individual, impervious to the whims of others. I cannot teach Christopher to be an intellectual and a socially responsible person unless I demonstrate to him through my actions that I myself am such a person. I want to teach Christopher that it is far better to belong to the critical minority than the unquestioning majority. I want to teach him the ability to think independently, to evaluate ideas and information on his own without the official sanction of the authorities, and if possible, to create. That should be the creed of anyone who is on this path of enlightenment. It's not easy, but it's worth it." Anyways, that's all the time I have for this video. It's getting a little long. If you like this video and type of content I'm making, consider giving this video a like or maybe subscribing. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.